What's up, guys? Welcome into the F6 Football Podcast. Cam Copeland here with co-host Alex Rogalin, and today we're going to be going over all things Commanders. We're going to be going over the change in ownership, offseason grades, projections, offense, defense, you name it. So that is what we are going to be diving right into. But first, Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Cam. Thanks. Yeah, it's been a busy week, but preseason is kind of seems like it's going by slowly. But every day we're getting closer to regular season and closer to real football. So I'm excited, man.
Yeah, the preseason, it's just starting week 2 tonight. It's
Yep.
Thursday night, and I feel like it's already been 3 weeks. So I don't know what's up with that, but I'm ready
Yeah,
for some real starters to get out there.
yeah, absolutely. And I always I don't totally. I guess I understand why, but I feel like that week in between preseason and the first game, which will be the Lions and the Chiefs this year, that week seems to take forever. And I know it's there because you have after you have the roster cut downs, then it's like teams are trying to fill their practice squads, and there's some transactions, but I just feel like that week drags on because then the first game's not till Thursday of the following week. So it's like a good 10 or 11 days with nothing.
Well, that's
And then
draft
and then
week, my
everything
friend.
starts.
That's fantasy football week right
That's
there.
right. That's right.
Most
That's
important
right.
couple weeks of the year for some people. So, yeah, why don't we just go ahead and jump right into the Commanders? Sound good?
That sounds great, Cam.
All right, so I want to start off just with a brief overview. And how can I start anywhere other than ownership, right? Because finally, there is a new owner of the Washington Commanders. Josh Harris bought it from Dan Snyder, or should I say the Josh Harris Group, for $6.05 billion. Now,
Woo.
just for a quick history lesson, Dan Snyder bought the Redskins in 1999 for $800 million. And that was at the time the most expensive transaction in the history of sports, period. So come a long way to get up to 6.05 billion from Josh Harris Group, which includes Magic Johnson, which is always a little bit fun to say. So tis a new beginning, and as Josh Harris has always said, trust the process, right?
Yes, that's right. And I actually have a quick story for you, Cam.
Yeah.
The related to Dan Schneider. So when I was in college, I went and saw the Chiefs play at FedEx Field against the Redskins. And we got like really cheap. I was a poor college student, so we got like nosebleed seats at the very top. But then one of the people in the group had an aunt that was like lower deck. So at halftime, we went down and we were somewhere around the 50. And this was one of those years when the Chiefs and the Redskins were terrible. I mean, I think the game ended up like 9-6 or something.
Like most years.
It was a terrible game. But I do remember more than the game itself. I remember the entire second half. Dan Schneider's booth was back behind where we were sitting, and the entire time they just chanted "Fire Dan Schneider, fire Dan Schneider." The whole second half, like the Redskins fans weren't even watching the game; like they were literally turned around the opposite direction of the field, just pumping their fist, "Fire Dan Schneider."
And what year
So
was this?
this would have been in 2010, either
Jeez.
2009, 2010, somewhere in there.
Long time coming.
Yeah, you're dating me now, making me feel old. But either way, it was that was my first and only FedEx Field experience.
FedEx Field is historically known for the experiences it provides. So, all right. Well, I'm going to jump into a quick overview of the team itself. Just this last year, they went 8-1, extremely average. And under Dan Snyder, let me just add, there was the Dan Snyder era win record was 164 wins to 220 losses, which is a 42.7% win rate, and then a postseason record of 2-6. So not a good showing over the last several decades.
Mm-hmm.
And among these issues lately, we've had a revolving door of quarterbacks. So in 2017, there was Kirk Cousins at the helm, and then here are the starting quarterbacks since just 2018. Josh Johnson, Mark Sanchez, Case Keenum, Colt McCoy, Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Garrett Gilbert, Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz, and finally Sam Howell. So you've had a couple of guys coming in, And, we're going into this next season with Sam Howell at the helm. Now, the Vegas projections right now are 6.5 wins uh, with a odds on division at plus 1300 with the 24th most or 24th easiest strength of schedule. So what are your thoughts of this team overall, Alex? Just right now heading into this upcoming season, new owner. And
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways the only way is up, right? I mean, with the new owner, I think that's certainly provided, a lot of excitement, maybe that hasn't been there in many years. Especially because, for those of you that don't know, we live here. I'm in Richmond. Cam is up in the Northern Virginia area. And so we live sort of in, I guess, what you would call, Washington territory for probably a lot of regional fans. And there's definitely been a lot more buzz around the team this season. And I don't necessarily think it's because the team itself. I think that new ownership has just sort of injected life back into the franchise. And so I think there's a level of excitement that hasn't been there. But I mean, this is one of the harder teams, I think, to predict. So I'm really excited that we're going to go over this show, and I'm excited to hear some of your takes on a lot of these projections, Cam, because I honestly don't know. I think that I just think it's so volatile. This team could be this team could be terrible, or this team could be a sneaky playoff team. So we'll see, man. I'm excited to hear your takes on it, and as we dive more into it.
Yeah, but as you said, the important thing right now, fans are reinvigorated. They're showing up at the practices, right? They're actually, they're actually going this year as opposed to the last couple of years, and they're selling seats. And clearly, if you're watching on YouTube, people are buying more gear and merchandise from the team. This is episode 3 and my third time wearing a Washington Commanders something or other. So I'm excited. And I'm ready to see what this team has in store. So let's start with just one more quick overview note that I did not add, and that is just coaching changes, right? Because they kept Ron Rivera, they kept head coach, they kept Jack Del Rio, defensive coordinator, but they brought in Eric Bieniemy from your beloved Chiefs. So that it just wraps up the overview. We're going to be getting into exactly what that means for the team here in a minute. But before we do that, Alex, what are your projections for this team? I know you said it could be volatile, but what are you thinking right now?
Yeah. I mean, you're putting me on the spot, which is good. That's what we do on this show. We like to hold our own feet to the fire, as I like to say. I think they're going to be average. And we'll talk more about that as we go on. But yeah, I mean, I got them around maybe 7 and 10 if I had to pick it. What did you say the over under was, Cam?
6.5.
Okay, so I guess I'll take the over, but barely. Barely. So I got them somewhere around 7-10, I think. What about you?
Well, my fandom will come out throughout the show, but not right now because I have them with 6 wins currently.
Okay.
So we're both hovering right around that 6.5 mark. It seems to be a reasonable mark by Vegas, as they typically do. So to just piggyback off that, my projections for this team, right, 6 and 11, which will give them roughly the 6th, 7th, 8th-ish draft pick next year, which depending on how other teams do. And that's kind of an unfortunate spot to be in if you have that few wins and you're unsure about your quarterback. So if we hit that 6 or 7 win mark, hopefully Sam Howell can prove that he is a guy or the guy for the foreseeable future, so we can allocate resources elsewhere. Because if we don't have a top 2 pick in the draft and we're looking for a quarterback, then it could be a little bit of a rough offseason again, bringing in new guys to add to the list of quarterbacks starting for this team. So that is my current projection. I also believe that Rivera and Del Rio will both be gone after this season because I don't see how they can produce a winning record with their schedule ahead in the NFC East and just the caliber of this team as it stands and the experience at quarterback. It's just a lot needs to come together to produce a winning record. And I think this new, Josh Harris and company are going to want to pick their guys to run this team.
Do you think would you consider Rivera to be on the hot seat this year, or what do you
Oh
think
yeah,
with the new ownership?
absolutely. I mean, you look at Rivera's historic win percentage or record, should I say, year to year, and it's just not good. And he's always been, a player's coach, always been a good guy, so to speak. And we needed a guy like that when all the culture issues were happening several years ago. We brought in someone to turn that around, and I'd say he did a very good job at with his position in really making changing the culture. Uh, I know it's said a lot, but it's true. And at this point, I just think moving on might be a good call. I respect them for not making any brash decisions right off the bat, coming in cleaning house, because it is going to take a little bit of time. I think we're in kind of an awkward spot financially, but we'll talk about that more a little bit later as well. All right, so that is our projections. So we're going to jump into what is going on within the team, and that starts with everything new this offseason. Alex, you want to take this away to start?
Yeah, absolutely, Cam. So I'll go over a couple just for records. I'll go over some of the free agents, and we're going to talk about things we like, things we don't like about that. The most money spent on a free agent this offseason was Andrew Wiley coming over from Kansas City. Looks like his deal was 3 years, around $24 million. And then next up on total money, we have Nick Gates coming to Washington from the Giants. He got a 3-year deal worth $16.5 million. And then from there, it's just sort of a spattering of different 1 and 2 year deals, most of them lower dollar amounts. Jacoby Brissett did come in on a 1-year, $8 million deal. So I think, and then it looks like as far as re-signing goes, they did re-sign, is it Efe Obada? Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. So a defensive end coming in, brought him back on a 1-year, $2 million deal. Also brought back Tyler Larson, center, for $1.3 million. Also, I actually didn't see this my last time through, but I saw they also brought another ex Kansas City guy, Byron Pringle, came over for a little bit over $1 million. And then some other kind of smaller guys at the end of the roster. So that's kind of an overview of most of the kind of key free agents they brought in. As far as losses go, they did lose Taylor Heinicke. Heinicke. And then I think they also lost Cole Holcomb, linebacker. Looks like he went for about 3 years, $18 million over to the Steelers. But those, I don't know how many of these other guys were starters, but most of the other deals were lower dollar deals, other than Heinicke and Holcomb. Yeah. So that's an overview. What do you want to get in? Should we go over free agents first, or do you want to, and then we'll do the draft after that?
Yeah, sounds good to me. So as you said, go ahead.
I was just going to say a couple quick takes that I have on a couple of these guys. I mean, honestly, I don't know I don't know a lot about Nick Gates, so I can't speak too much to him. I can't speak on Andrew Wiley. Obviously, he was a part of the Chiefs Super Bowl winning team. Actually, he was on both of the teams. He was on the 2019 Chiefs as well as this, this past year two-time Super Bowl champion. And honestly, he filled in great at right tackle. Excuse me. It's been a long day, everybody. And I think early in the year, a lot of Chief fans last year, we were unsure. We kind of thought that Wiley was kind of a fill-in over at right tackle and kind of waiting to see how everything shook out. But honestly, he had a great season. He held it down. He wasn't elite by any means, but he was serviceable. And I think that it just came down to money. I think if he would have been willing to come at a lower price, I think the Chiefs would have tried to retain him. But there was just no way the Chiefs, with their cap, they're pretty squeezed up tight to the cap, and they weren't going to pay $24 million for him. But I think he's a serviceable player. Certainly not. I wouldn't consider him an elite right tackle. Maybe average, maybe above average, depending on kind of how you look at him. But so I don't think a bad pickup, but I do think a little bit pricey.
Yeah. So for me, it seems like, here's the thing: they addressed the areas on the team this offseason that needed to be addressed. They addressed the secondary in the draft, which we'll get to. They addressed the offensive line with bringing in free agents. So I'll give them credit for that. My one issue with some of these signings is it feels like they just brought in more bodies. They didn't make significant upgrades per se from last year, right? As you say, they bring in Andrew Wiley, who is fine, but is he going to be much better than either Sam Cosmi or Cornelius Lucas, whoever was playing at the time at right tackle last year? While Sam Cosmi bumps into guard this year, I don't know if he's going to be much of an improvement. Is he going to be a $24 million improvement? Probably not. And then with Gates, he's fine. He came over from the Giants. He's an undrafted free agent, but he started a bit there. And I'm not exactly sure if he's going to even be starting along this line, right? They drafted Ricky Stromberg in the third to play center, and they brought back Tyler Larson. So we'll see what the final depth chart is when they go into the season. But yeah, they addressed the offensive line, which was needed. Hopefully these guys can turn out pretty well. It just didn't feel like they brought in too many impact players, and that goes for the defense too, right? They brought in Cody Barton, and he's also just a guy. He's fine. He's coming over from Seattle on what, $3.5 million contract. And yep. I just, the linebacking core needed help. Good. They brought someone in. We'll see what he can do. I'm just not too optimistic that the guys they brought in can be game changers or impact players.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Cam. That's a great way to put it. Do you want to give an overview then of the draft and maybe some of your takes on that?
Yeah, so I'm not going to walk through all of their picks. Actually, I might, but they addressed the secondary, as I said, very extensively in the draft. They took Emmanuel Forbes in the first round, and that was an interesting pick because people thought they were going to take a cornerback. All the mock drafters of the world loved giving them a cornerback, whether it was Joey Porter or Christian Gonzalez, who were both available at the time of their pick, by the way. But they went with Forbes, and Forbes is a ball hawk. That is why they selected him. Rivera actually sort of addressed that. They generate pressure with a stud defensive line, right? And we had very few turnovers last year. We, I believe, had 9 interceptions on the season, and that is close to that. I believe that's bottom 5 in the NFL. And Forbes had 6 interceptions just last season. Three kind of bounced in his direction. That happens, but some of his interceptions were very impressive. And it was an interesting pick because, I do a lot of scouting myself, and I had my big board going into the draft, and Christian Gonzalez was around at pick 16 when we were picking, and he was 6th on my big board. Well, Forbes was down at 42. And I love the talent, but here's what I wrote. Playing at 166 pounds has taken him out of the first round conversation. Rank 42 is a good spot to reconcile his obvious talent with his play weight, right? Because how is he going to go against DK Metcalf or T. Higgins or AJ Brown? We have Benjamin St. Juste, who is good. He's 6'3", I believe, pretty lanky, and he is a good contested catch guy. He can really get in there and break it up. So that's good that we already have him on the roster. But it was just an interesting decision. And then in the second round, they drafted Jartavius Martin, who is also a safety / nickel defender, so slot cornerback. And a lot of people think he was overdrafted, but we needed it, and they addressed it. So we're going to see how these guys pan out. Moving down in the draft, as I said, in the third round, they drafted Ricky Stromberg. And then in the fourth, they addressed the offensive line further with Braden Daniels. And then I'm just going to get to my favorite pick, and that's KJ Henry in the 5th. And he's my favorite pick, not necessarily because of his talent, but I think it's great value at right there. He's a former 5-star recruit, defensive end out of Clemson. And we are potentially losing both Montez Sweat and Chase Young this year. We didn't pick up Chase Young's 5th-year option. Montez Sweat is due for a payday, and we've just paid our interior guys. So I think trying to develop KJ Henry into what where his potential could have been when he was coming out of high school as a 5-star recruit. Something that you can see about all the Clemson guys, but Brian Brzee, Miles Murphy, they're these athletic guys who have no technique. And maybe that's just sort of, they focus on scheme and don't focus so much on technique there. So hopefully we can help develop him into something as well. And I'm just going to round out this draft because I am so close to getting it done. Chris Rodriguez, running back in the 6th round. And then in the 7th round, I do not have this one in front of me. It was Andre Jones, right? Another defensive end. I don't know much about him.
Out of Louisiana. Yep.
Okay. So that was a full rundown of their draft. And I'm going to go ahead and just say I have given their full offseason and draft a B- grade. And it's a B-. I've mentioned that I don't love all of the players they brought in, but they addressed where they needed to address. And I think that is, good management overall. And disagreements on the selections aside, I think it was a good process. I'd like to give them an A+ for offseason because of the ownership change. But that aside, I think they did a solid job.
Yeah, that makes sense, Cam. When I was looking at the draft results, one of the things that kind of stuck out to me was, only one skill position, and that was Chris Rodriguez, running back, as you mentioned, taken down in the 6th round. And then, I think the draft really showed what Ron Rivera wanted to improve, right? Yeah, as you mentioned, he wanted to focus first on the secondary and then get better in the trenches by taking 2 offensive linemen and 2 defensive linemen. We'll see. Like you said, I don't know if their 7th rounder Andre Jones will even make the team. That's not a guarantee with guys that are late, but certainly, those 3rd and 4th round offensive linemen, those guys are expected to compete for a starting position. And so I think that also does speak to the weapons, and we'll talk more about this when we go through the position groups, but I think it also speaks to the confidence that, that Rivera has in the wide receiver core and the running back group. And so, I think that's one of the things that kind of stands out to me. And I think that makes sense. If you look at some of the elite teams in the league, they really invest pretty heavily in the trenches. And so that I think will be, and of course, the Commanders are already really, really great on the defensive side of the line. So we'll see if some of those guys work out. My overall grade is C. And that's really kind of back to what I said about average. And you actually touched on it earlier, is that I was thinking about it, and I think you really did a great job covering it, because I don't think Andrew Wiley's bad, but is he better than what was already there, right? And I just feel like Sam Howell too, that he's such a question mark for me. And I know he got in a little bit late last year, and got a little bit of experience there. But I mean, this will be obviously his first year starting the season as the starter and going through the offseason as sort of I think the unquestioned starter. And so, I don't think that they got drastically better. I don't think they got worse. And so I just put him in the middle with a C.
I think that's very reasonable. All right. If we're done with the offseason, why don't we hop into the offense? Because that is very exciting with the new coach coming in. Before I kick off an overview of the offense, do you have any just initial thoughts on the change from Scott Turner to Eric Bieniemy from your Chiefs?
Yeah, I think we actually talked on this a little bit on our last show, on the NFC show. So if you guys haven't checked that out yet, it's in our podcast feed. Go take a listen to that, and you'll hear a little bit. Cam and I do more of an overview of really the whole NFC. But I do think it's really interesting, some of the stories that have been coming out of camp. What Rivera has said about Bieniemy, and I think it's a good change. I mean, Bieniemy is intense, but he's a former player. Obviously, he's been a part of a championship program for the last quite a few years, and he brings that. He's a former running back, so he likes to he's aggressive by nature, right? And I mean, I think that I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, football is a sport that, you're expected to do the right thing and to know your job and to perform it. And you're expected to do that to the best of your ability. Just like when I played Pee Wee football, I played high school football. I remember my coaches, I was a defensive back, my coaches screaming things to me that I can't repeat on this podcast or get blocked. Right. But I mean but the point is that you're expected to know your job. You're expected to do it. So I do think it's really interesting that Bieniemy is really on the guys. I mean, he really expects them to do it right. And it seems like that's sort of, I don't know, rattled the cages a little bit. And to me, I think that would reflect that it's a good change. Having accountability for your guys to know what they're supposed to do it, and then to get on them when they fail to do it to the best of their ability, or they fail to give the effort. That to me sounds like good coaching. So some of the guys may not be used to that, but if you want to have a winning program, then you need someone that's intense, that expects you to do it the right way, kind of that old school approach. So I like it. I know that obviously some of the guys haven't seemed like they've responded as well, or at least that's what the rumors are. But overall, I think it'll be a good change.
Yeah, I agree, and you can probably tell what the practices had been like by this statistic. I'm going to
Yeah,
jump
good point.
into Scott Turner's offense a bit here in a second. The offensive coordinator from last season and a couple years prior, the uh, the Washington Commanders last season had the most time of possession in the entire NFL, and they were near the bottom in plays per minute. So while that statistically makes sense as it is, if you're trying to hold on to the ball, you're slowing things down with the run game. It also could be a slight indication of a little bit of lackluster practices. They don't run the hurry up offense often. It's probably just a big change in not just expectations, but in scheme that people, the players really just need to adapt to. They're just not used to it.
The tempo.
So
Yep.
yeah, the change in tempo. And with that said, going to go through Scott Turner's offense from 2022 and a couple stats there and see how it can change with Bieniemy's scheme and what they were running over under Andy Reid in Kansas City. So Scott Turner technically runs more of an Air Coryell offense, and what that basically is a vertical passing offense. They were gap heavy run team, so it, as opposed to zone. So they did a lot of lead blockers. It's a lot of pulling guards, pulling tight ends, running through holes on the inside with the lead block, and that led to pretty low yards per carry. They were the fourth in rushing attempts in the NFL, but they were 12th in rushing yardage, which 12th seems fine, but compared to fourth in attempts, it's definitely on the lower side. They were also had the 10th most runs on first down, so they were a run first team, despite having such a good receiving trio that we'll get into. And then a couple PFF metrics for overall PFF passing grade. They were 30th, ahead of only the Bears and the Jets. So ahead of Justin Fields with no offensive line and no wide receivers, and the Zach Wilson and company over. So not very good company. And then even their PFF rushing grade was 27th in the NFL. So a couple more things I was looking up before this is EPA for offense. So what that is, expected points added. It's calculated field based on play-by-play data. They were 26th in offensive EPA, 26th in quarterback EPA, with Hal, Wentz, and Heineke all having negative. None of them had positive. And then they were 27th in pass block win rate. So basically, all these seemingly random stats thrown out, they were not efficient runners. They weren't good at passers. They weren't good blockers. And it seems like with some of the talent we have, now there were clearly offensive line and quarterback issues, but we do have enough talent to where that probably shouldn't be the case. So Scott Turner is out and Eric Bieniemy is in. Now, Eric Bieniemy, I don't know what he's going to bring. Is he going to bring Reid's sort of shotgun West Coast-ish offense? He'll probably be, zone heavy because the Chiefs were zone heavy last season. Although halfway through the season, they started incorporating a lot more gap runs into their playbook, which I thought was interesting. And the runners we have right now, the running backs in Brian Robinson, and then the guy drafted, Chris Rodriguez. They're pretty much they're the difference in ability for gap running versus zone is pretty extreme. So it would be surprising if we fully switch over to like an outside or inside zone from gap. But I'm looking forward to seeing what Eric Bieniemy brings, because that's the whole thing. That's why he hasn't gotten a head coaching job, because no one knows what he does outside of Andy Reid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And I wonder if that change that you mentioned on the running style, and I wonder if that had something to do with Isaiah Pacheco. And I mean, for those that may not have followed that season last year, the Chiefs started the year with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon, and then as Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he got hurt, but also he just wasn't really effective in the running game. He did okay in the passing game, but struggled in the running game. And then once they brought Isaiah Pacheco up to speed, he was much better and much more effective, and just runs a lot harder in that second half of the season. So yeah, I agree, Cam. I'm curious to see what Bieniemy's going to do. Obviously he's been under Andy Reid, and there's probably no better offensive mind to learn under. Right. But that doesn't always mean you can replicate it. Andy Reid has a lot of guys that are sort of Reid disciples that go on to head coaching positions, Rivera being one of them, ironically. And so, to various levels of success, Matt Nagy kind of struggled reproducing some of that offensive firepower, when he was in Chicago, although they had a solid defense. But I mean, you think about Doug Peterson, though, is one that I would say has been able to at least replicate that from an offensive perspective. And so, yeah, I agree. It'll be really curious to see kind of what style, being a running back. I wonder if Bieniemy leans into that maybe more than Andy, because that has been a criticism with Andy over the years is, he's just not one to line up very often and pound the football, even on third down, he'd rather he'll do screens. He'll do swing screens or he'll even do tight end screens. He'll do lots of motion or just let Mahomes kind of scramble. So be curious to see what Bieniemy does.
Underhand passes to Travis Kelce.
Yes.
Your way to Logan Thomas.
That's right.
Similar caliber player. It's just interesting you mentioned Pacheco, because he was a 7th round draft pick, right?
He was
a 7th round pick for a reason. He wasn't considered the best prospect, but if you get a good athlete who runs hard and you just have him run gap, he's going to be fine.
The blocking's there.
You don't need the vision. We'll see what Eric Bieniemy brings. Now, how do you rank this offense as a whole? And then we can get into the individual positions.
Yep. So you're probably gonna know my answer. I think they're average. I don't think, although I know that you listed off, obviously the last year they were obviously below average, and that's pretty clear based on those rankings that you provided. But for me, there's a little bit of optimism. I'm a little bit of an optimist, I would say, in most situations. So I'm hoping that Hal comes out and has a great year. But I mean, I think I do really like the skill positions. I do think, especially at wide receiver, I mean, obviously Terry McLaurin is an absolute stud. Dotson looked really good last year, which means he probably got Curtis Samuel as maybe the 3, right? And maybe he's pushed for some other folks for some time. I know even De'Ami Brown, right? He's had some flashes here and there. So I think the wide receiver group is solid. I like the running back room as well, with Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, and now adding in a new rookie running back. So, I mean, and of course, at tight end, you mentioned if Logan Thomas can stay healthy, he certainly has had a lot of potential. I know he's battled injuries, but he certainly, when he's healthy, can be a great tight end option. So I like the skill positions. Like we already talked about, I'm nervous about the offensive line, especially with a young quarterback. I mean, he's going to need time, and he's going to need that run game for him to really get into it and find a groove. But I do think we'll find out pretty quickly. I don't think it's going to take the whole season. I think we're going to be, I bet you by 5-6 games in, we're going to have a pretty good feel for, does Sam Howell have the potential, has he flashed the playmaking ability and the decision making and kind of making the most of the situation, or he just doesn't have it, and it's going to be another long season. So
Yeah.
I would say average. I don't think they'll be. I like I said, really like some of the position groups, the skill positions. I would say just unknown with the line and unknown with quarterback play.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I guess I would have them below average. I have them currently ranked as a 22nd offense in the league, right between the Panthers and Broncos. Not the best company. I have Panthers and Broncos. Panthers.
Well, you're being generous to the Broncos.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, again, so Panthers have a better offensive line. They got Bryce Young, but a much worse receiving core. So I'm counting on the skill of Washington to just sort of beat them out in power rankings. And then Broncos, they were bad. They were really bad with Russell Wilson, and we'll see what they can do this year. I'm giving them a little benefit of the doubt, but 22nd isn't great, but it's also not not the worst in the league. So that kind of lines up with the whole 6-11 projection pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, as you said, it is a big question mark at quarterback because they brought Jacoby Brissett, who has been looking like Jacoby Brissett, very serviceable. And then Sam Howell, he's a starter. And I'm going to just, for those who don't know background on Sam Howell, just very quick rundown. A lot of people had a first round grade on him going into the draft. He was finally picked in the 5th round out of North Carolina after dropping way farther than pretty much everyone expected. The previous year, he was originally projected to be a top 2 overall pick, along with Spencer Rattler, who, by the way, I just saw an article on yesterday saying how he looks like he's finally reached his potential.
He's reemerged.
That's interesting. Yeah, as he has every year. Yep. And then in college, his penultimate season in 2020, he was pretty elite through the air. He has Diami Brown, or had Diami Brown. Now he does again. Now that he's on Washington, and that went well for him. But in 2021, he lost weapons, but he still ran for over 800 rushing yards, and that's 800 college rushing yards where they add negative yards for sacks and whatnot. So he seems like a playmaker. He has a great arm. He makes things happen. And that said, he dropped to the 5th, which means he was passed by every team at least 4 times on average. And there's a reason for that. So we will see what he can do. I am very optimistic. I'm one of those people who had a later first round grade on him. I thought he has shown enough to elicit earn it to where he could earn a starting spot for an NFL team, which he has done. I am more concerned about the offensive line, keeping him on his feet. But that's just a quick overview of Sam Howell. Brissett could come in at any moment. He might halfway through the year. Just, yet another quarterback starting for Washington. And so my grade on this quarterback room is TBD. No idea, because we have no way of really knowing.
Yeah, that makes sense, Cam. And I know that, I know that you've done a lot of analysis and looking at draft prospects over the years. Do you think that at face value, I think I've seen this trend of, and I want you to tell me if you agree or not. It seems like quarterbacks from, I'm not going to say North Carolina is a small school, but when it comes to football, they're certainly not considered a top tier school. In the ACC, it's just Clemson, basically. It is the only, ACC school that I think, really is looked at as an elite program, or, at least has been in recent years. And it seems like quarterbacks that are coming certainly from non-power conferences, there's questions about, the level of competition, and kind of how that is translated. So based on your analysis, do you see, do you think that going to North Carolina and maybe NFL teams having concerns about the level of competition in the ACC, do you think that was one of the contributing factors on his drop?
Well, I'm gonna bring up 2 things. One, to your point, Trey Lance has now been beaten out by Sam Darnold on the depth chart. He looks terrible. He had no competition, and he looked perfect, and actually perfect. in many of his games in college, running, passing. And so competition definitely matters. It's always hard to assess if you're not in the SEC. It's just difficult. And people are often wrong. And now, before I directly answer your question, look who's at North Carolina now. Drake May is very possibly going to be a top 5 overall pick. He could go up to number 2 overall. He just is. I mean, he's worlds better as a prospect, I will say, than Sam Howell. I mentioned I had a late first round grade on Sam Howell. I'm very generous towards quarterbacks because they are such an important position. If I think you're going to be an upgrade for most teams, you will be towards the top of the big board because it's just that important. Sam Howell seemed like a prospect who had flashed so much ability regardless of competition, right? He had the arm, he had the sneaky athleticism, not sneaky athletic. He's a pretty athletic dude with a big arm, and he's made big time throws, and seems to know how to at least take care of the ball most of the time. So I think that he was a good, better than a project, but not an immediate starter. And that's who he was drafted as a project because that's what you consider day 3 quarterbacks, essentially, right? So with regard to your point on competition, it matters because it makes the assessment hard. I don't think that will necessarily dooms a player because I'm very confident in Drake May after watching his tape in the last couple of months.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I wonder if not that one player can ruin it for future players, but I mean, you talk about North Carolina. Obviously, you got to think of Trubisky, and then what folks thought about him, and obviously you think about the Bears, passing up on both Mahomes and Deshaun Watson to even trade picks to move up and to get Trubisky. Sorry, Bears fans, I know that still hurts, but I wonder if sort of the I don't always like to throw around the term bust, but I mean, based on your where you're drafted, it certainly adds connotations for what teams are expecting out of you. And of course, based on how high of a pick, I think Trubisky was 2, wasn't he 2nd overall?
Yep.
Obviously I would say his career has not gone as they hoped.
No,
that's an understatement.
Yeah. And I very much dislike helmet scouting, right? I don't like comparing prospects of the same school because they went to the same school. But you get Trubisky, and then if Sam Howell is a complete bust this season, looks terrible, there will be those people who are worried about Drake May.
Sure.
Again, completely unreasonable. I would never agree with that, but it's human nature. The last 2 have stunk. Why is this guy any different? So anyway, let's move on to the skill group. Just in general, skill group, right? Running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, and talk about them as a whole. Because I think most people would agree that their wide receiver trio, their starters, and Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuel are easily one of the better trios in the league. I can't think of very many proven third receivers who are better than Curtis Samuel. So our 11 personnel is excellent. But that said, running backs, everyone's always wanted Antonio Gibson to be special. And he's been good. He has not yet been special. And then at the tight end position, we keep having these guys. We've had Logan Thomas and we have John Bates, and then we drafted Cole Turner late last year. Let me read some EPA stats again, because I love this metric. So for receivers, anyone receiving the ball at any position with at least 20 targets, positive EPA on the team: McLaurin, Dotson, Samuel, and Gibson. Negative EPA: J.D. McKissick, Logan Thomas, and John Bates, way down there. So that's our Thomas and Bates. It's our tight end room. So I'm going to just preemptively give this skill group an A- because the trio is so strong. I would easily give them an A, or I wouldn't give them an A+. I give them an A, but I am concerned about the tight end position. Now we do have, everyone was a late round pick. Logan Thomas he was drafted as a quarterback, right?
Yeah, at Virginia
Yeah,
Tech. Yep.
exactly. So 4th round pick. Bates is a 4th round pick. Cole Turner is a 5th round pick. None of these guys were deemed studs coming out. But Logan Thomas is a solid receiver. John Bates is a great run blocker, or a good run blocker, and Cole Turner is promising. We'll talk about him more towards the end of the show. But second round guy. I'm just concerned about that group. But there is no doubt that these receivers are barely short of elite, if not elite.
Yep, I agree. I can't disagree with that. One thing I do think that we'll want to see out of the tight ends, for the Commanders is, I would say, there's not a ton of height in the receiver room. Obviously, that I know McLaurin, I think, is 6 foot. That doesn't make he's an absolute stud, right? That doesn't seem to be a problem for him.
Yeah.
I think Dotson is 5'11", right, and Samuel 5'11". So not little guys, but I would say not necessarily real tall targets. Can certainly jump, but I think that when we're looking at those tight ends, I think both those tight ends come in at 6'6", 6'5". Obviously, that's pretty regular for a tight end, I would say. But I think that, down in the red zone when things are getting tight, it'll be curious to see if they start to try to go to those big guys, or if they're able to get enough separation from the receivers in some of those tight windows. So curious to see that, but yeah, I mean, other than not having them be, Calvin Johnson, that's all. But great receiving room. Definitely, I would say one of the elite for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I can think of a couple. I mean, the Bengals come to mind, and there's certainly,
Right.
The Eagles. There's certainly some other teams that are right there as well with elite receiver groups. But I mean, I don't think it's at all to go on a limb to say that the receiving group for the Commanders is, well, at least for wide receivers, is significantly better than what the Chiefs have. So that's coming from a Chiefs fan, everybody. So yeah, I think I would agree with that assessment.
Oh, can you imagine Mahomes with these three? That would
Come
be
on,
something.
McLaurin. Come to Kansas City.
So yeah, I mean, what they lost their one adequate red zone receiver in Cam Sims. Again, adequate, nothing great. And Dyami Brown is going to be that, probably stepping into a slightly bigger role, taking the Cam Sims snaps as that outside guy who can be sideline deep threat. And Dyami Brown's also 6 feet, but what this core lacks in height, they make up for in speed, which will be useful between the 20s, as you say, not as much so in the red zone. Now, I just want to talk about Jahan Dotson for a second, because people don't categorize him in the same light as the Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Chris Olave, right? And Washington was up on the clock at pick 11 last year, and Kyle Hamilton, safety, was still on the board, and Chris Olave was still on the board, and they traded back to 16, and they said we knew we could get Dotson later. We didn't want to trade back too far because he was our guy all along. We would have drafted him at 11. And so they love this guy, and I liked him more than most coming out. So I was happy when they got him. I didn't love the capital they spent, but he has incredible hands. He's proven to be a great second receiver. I think he can be more than that. In the absence of Terry McLaurin, I think he certainly has the potential to step up into a leading role. So I think that people are, they know he's good. I don't think a lot of people see the potential of him being great. He has a vast route tree. Again, he rarely drops the ball. Pretty much didn't in college. And, I also with Curtis Samuel, 2 years ago, they signed him. And I remember calling up my friend and saying, what do I do? I am so excited. He said, yeah, man, adrenaline's great. Can't really do anything, but, I love Curtis Samuel. And people stopped talking about this core, probably because of just overall poor quarterback play the last couple of years. But they're strong, and I think they're going to have a bigger season if the offensive line can hold up and give Sam Howell more than 1.5 seconds to throw the ball.
Yeah.
All right, and then I just want to touch one more thing on this running back room. We've talked about how we sort of have the Commanders sort of have a good, not great running back room. They're very solid. But we just have to bring this up because Brian Robinson got shot, right? He got shot twice. Got shot in the glute and lower leg on August 28th last year. He started playing running back 6 weeks to the day after he got shot twice. And he started, I believe, every game during the season, or played at least in every game. I don't recall if there's a minor injury in this midseason, but early in the season, he struggled a bit to provide production, understandably. And later in the season, he was getting about 4.5 yards a carry. That's almost a full yard per carry more than earlier in the season. So, if he can show up, and he's part of his hindrance last season was, being shot, which I would understand, then he could prove to be better than people think. I'll tell you right now, he's going in, I believe, the 9th round in most fantasy football drafts. That's way too low. He's not exciting, but he's a plug and play guy. So, look for him as a late round safety net if you're into fantasy.
And if I remember right, Cam, he's out of Memphis and he played like wide receiver in college. Is that right? He was a converted wide receiver to running
I was
back?
talking about Brian Robinson.
Yeah. Is that Gibson that I'm thinking of?
Yeah. Brian Robinson, Alabama.
Yeah. Bama. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Thanks. I was like, I remember one of the running backs came from Memphis and switched. Okay. Got it.
Gibson is he was a wide receiver at Memphis. You're right.
Got it. Okay.
3rd round, converted to running back, and then they stopped throwing the ball to him. Seemed odd.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yep, but he should be getting more receptions this year with JD McKissic gone. All right, last, and I guess probably least, offensive line. I'll keep this one short. Again, we had an NFC show last week where I go pretty extensively into the offensive line, just cover every probable starting position. I'm giving this group a D+ because we have no superstars, a lot of question marks, and they brought in bodies instead of acquiring talent. So that's it. D+.
No argument for me. Yep.
All right, man, let's get into the defense. Now, Jack Del Rio is still there. They had a high zone coverage rate. They had a lot of cover 3 and 4, but particularly cover 4 compared to most of the league. They were 28th in defensive EPA, right? So we talk about this team having a good defense. 28th in defensive EPA is not good. They were 16th, so middle of the pack in pass rush win rate. And remember, that was mostly with Chase Young being gone or just not quite as productive later in the season. He had under 200 snaps, I believe. And James Smith-Williams starting, he had the second most snaps at defensive end. So they didn't have the best pass rush, but it was decent. They were 9th in run stop rate. And as I said earlier, they only had 9 interceptions, which was 28th in the league. So for a defense that is supposedly elite, question mark, they had a very bad showing last year.
Yeah. I actually didn't realize they were that low in the rankings because when I was thinking of the Commanders, I mean, and I was thinking about my rating, I have them as above average is what my projection is. So I don't have them as elite, but I do have them somewhere in that kind of above average to good range. And for me, I think I was thinking about the big fellows in the trenches, right? Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, I know Montez Sweat, right? Those 3 guys, all first rounders. Obviously, Chase Young, also a first rounder. I know you touched on him. Big season, kind of make or break season for him. And then I think they also have a linebacker, Davis, which is another first rounder. So a lot of first round guys invested a lot there in the kind of in the trenches, and the run stopping and all that. So I was surprised to hear that the rankings are that low because I do think that they have the talent to really be a really good defense.
Yeah, and now they got Emmanuel Forbes in the first round too, right? So a lot of first rounders on this defense. Call. And this is where my homerism is going to show a bit. I currently have their defense ranked 4th. And if you look up online lists of just random, football network, whatever, they all have the same name, I swear. But all the lists, I haven't seen one with Washington ranked below 7th this year, and then that's of about 20 minutes of looking. So it's not just me who thinks they're going to be great. But fourth, the only teams I have in front of them are the Cowboys, Niners, and Eagles. Unfortunately, 2 of their division mates. Hate putting the Cowboys that high, but they're currently number 1 for me. And then number 4 is a toss-up between the Jets and Commanders. But I think there's a tier break after those top 5. So I am pretty comfortable with my ranking on them. The one thing I will say, across the board, they are lacking depth. So any injury it's a pretty significant downgrade to them, especially along the defensive line or in the linebacking core. And with that, let's jump into the positional groups, starting with the defensive line. Did you want to go over anything here first, Alex?
No, I like the defensive line. Once again, every show we do, I have one outrageous take, and my outrageous take on this show is Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, and Chase Young are good. With that, that's my take. Good defensive line.
All right, we need to get some sound bites.
What do you think? What do you think about their projections for this year?
All right, so I have an A grade right now, and I'm going to say A+ if Young is elite. If he's the guy they drafted him to be.
Again, his rookie year.
Yeah, I've said it. Yeah, I've said it before. The reason Herbert and Tua, right? Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa were drafted lower at spots 5 and 6 is because Okudah and Chase Young were deemed to be such good can't miss prospects that it would be ridiculous to trade down and risk not getting one of those 2. So Young out of Ohio State was incredible. If you want to feel like you can run through a brick wall, go watch his Ohio State highlights, because he is ferocious. And then he just hasn't been. He had that injury, the ACL, a couple years ago. And now that he's 2 years removed, that's typically when players tend to bounce back in terms of performance in the NFL. You see it a lot at the running back position. Torn ACL, the following year, they're fine, not too confident on their cuts. The year after that, they're a bit more explosive. So that's what I'm hoping for with Chase Young. But I want to start off talking about Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen, the interior defenders. Now, Daron Payne got that big money contract this offseason, 4-year, $90 million. And Jonathan Allen's already making had a 4-year, $72 million contract. Alex, that's over $40 million per year for just these 2 interior defensive linemen. $40.5 million per year. They're both top 10 contracts for inside defensive linemen in the NFL. And, Allen's a phenomenal pass rusher. Payne can do both. He's a very good both run defender and pass rusher who can play 3-tech. He can play nose, shade nose. And they're easily, I'd say there are 4 interior defensive line tandems in the league that are at their level. It's them, and then the Eagles, Giants, and Colts. And after that, you don't really see a duo of this caliber anywhere in the NFL. Obviously, they're players like Chris Jones and Aaron Donald, but they don't have the guy beside him. So I think that this interior is going to be phenomenal. And then outside there's Sweat and Young. And Sweat's quietly playing out of his mind. He had 62 pressures and 30 run stops this last season. And for reference, Hassan Reddick had 68 pressures on exactly the same pass rush snap count. So very similar numbers to what a guy who had, I believe, 18 sacks last year, considered one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. And they put up similar numbers. So I think Sweat is due for a payday after the season. Big payday. He's on the last year of his contract, and so is Young. Sweat and Young are both, I'd say, probably off this team. If they can find a way to pay one of them, they probably pay Sweat unless Chase Young does something insane. And that's already so much money invested into the defensive line. So, but behind them, they're lacking depth. In the interior, Fedarian Mathis was a second-round play. He's a solid plug-and-play run defender. Had a knee injury in week 1 of last year. But besides that, it's John Ridgeway. They don't really have interior guys. And then, but yeah, Mathis could relieve Payne and Allen on some early down work, for instance. And James Smith-Williams had the second most snaps on the team at edge last year, and he just didn't do much. He wasn't that productive. So once again, great front four, pretty poor depth.
Yeah, definitely one of the. Yeah, I like your point earlier on. On having two interior defensive linemen at that caliber. Because that Chris Jones is good, but he's not even showing up yet. So, which I know we talked a little about him too the other day. So he's that's not. I don't want to derail that. I'll save that for my Chiefs take. But,
all right.
Definitely interior defensive line. I'd probably say they're the best in the league as far as if those guys stay healthy. They're definitely, those two guys are really good.
Yeah, another hot take.
Baby.
All right, we'll be pretty quick through the linebackers. I did want to make a point. So the linebackers right now, the starters are Jamin Davis and Cody Barton or David Mayo. I don't recall who's going to be on the field in 2 linebacker sets, but it's going to be those 3 guys. Okay, yeah, Cody Barton. So Davis, as you said, he was a first rounder. He was pretty unexperienced, and he has not really paid off as a first round pick. I know a lot of people thought that Washington would take Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah at 19, who ended up dropping late into the second round, I believe. But Davis is a rare athlete. He should absolutely be blitzing a lot. He had 65 pass rush snaps, which is good. But to pay off for that draft capital for a guy who doesn't really stack and shed blockers on the interior, he's going to have to make more of an impact. And I just want to make this a brief comparison. Obviously, there's a big talent disparity here. But when comparing him to Hassan Reddick, Jamin Davis is taller, heavier, faster. He has a faster 4.48. He has a much better vertical, 42 inches. He has longer arms, 33 inches. He's built kind of like a light defensive end. And he is just not that good at a, sit in the middle of the field kind of linebacker. He's not the best in coverage. And on his blitzing, he generated 13 pressures on the 65 pass rush snaps. And 20% is good. It's ahead of the top blitzing linebackers this last season were Zaven Collins, Frankie Luvu, Bobby Wagner, and Juwan Bentley. And he had a better pressure rate than all of them. And then Devin White, he's right up there around that line too. So I think if they can figure out ways to use him a little more creatively, use his athleticism, and hope that is, he's developed more as a player, then he could help this linebacking core a lot. I touched on Cody Barton earlier. He's fine coming over from Seattle. And then David Mayo, they like him a lot. They always have. He'll be on the field in 3 linebacker sets. And he missed 1 tackle last year. He missed 4 in 21, 4 in 2020. He's a very good tackler. He's a decent run defender. He can play strong side, can play pretty much anything that's asked of him on the interior when it comes to run defense. And he's horrific in coverage. And, with this, a big issue with the Commanders is they get eaten alive over the middle of the field on short passes. They are not good against these quick timing West Coast offenses. And none of the linebackers on the team are actively good in coverage. So I'm giving this core a C-. And that is taking into account Jamin Davis generating pressure here and there and making some big plays, taking a small step forward this season.
I think you covered it. I don't have anything different on that. So yeah.
All right.
And good coverage of the linebackers.
And one last thing to add about Davis. There's an interview I listened to with Ron Rivera about why they drafted him. This was a couple years ago. And they said they have an elite interior defensive line. They're going to be getting a lot of pressure up the middle, and they're going to stuff the runs up the middle. So they need a true sideline to sideline speedy middle linebacker to take care of quarterback scrambles for spy, take care of outside runs, get to the side before the running backs. And right now he's listed as an outside linebacker, right? That didn't really work out as well. He's probably not playing in the middle. So, it not exactly their plan, but hopefully he can take a step forward. Now, getting into the defensive backs, this might be a bit of homerism too, because this was such a poor group last year. Giving them a B plus, giving them a B plus. Fandom coming into play here because Emmanuel Forbes, first round pick, regardless of exactly what I think of it. I always thought he was super talented. I'm just worried about his size, 166 pounds. That is 20 pounds smaller than I am, and I am no NFL player. Kendall Fuller, he's solid on the inside and outside. He's always been solid. And then Benjamin St. Jude is listed as a starter in their first official, depth chart. And he's that lanky guy who can contest the T. Higginses and the A.J. Browns and DK Metcalfs of the world. So, I think it's a solid cornerback group, not a B plus worthy cornerback group. Where this really comes in is the safeties, because they drafted Cam Curl in the 7th round, and they drafted Derek Forrest in the 5th round. And both guys are really showing out. Cam Curl has been a stud for the last couple of years. And Derek Forrest, he had that big hit on Travis Etienne in week 1, and he just made so many plays that he kind of got put in the spotlight. I believe he had the highest PFF grade of any safety after week 1. And then he cooled off a bit, but he has earned that starting spot. And they have good depth at safety too, with Jeremy Reeves, Pro Bowl special teamer, might I add, Jeremy Reeves. And, they drafted Percy Butler in the 4th round last year. And he's at least looked decent in the preseason. So I think this secondary can take a huge step forward from last year. And if Chase Young can too, that's a big reason why I have this defense ranked as the 4th in the NFL.
Yeah, that's great points, Cam. I would say a guy that I'll be watching that I always root for is Kendall Fuller. He's a local guy out of Virginia Tech. And then he actually was involved in the Alex Smith trade. So came to Kansas City, won a Super Bowl, and then came back to Washington. So not a bad trip if you're going to go and spend a couple years somewhere else. So certainly a guy, I would say he's probably is he the most veteran guy on the defense? He's up there, right?
It seems that way anyway.
He's one of the more experienced guys on that side of the defense. So I think that hopefully he'll have a big season as well. So and then do you see Forbes as more of do you think he'll be more of an external, sorry, can't talk, as a boundary corner, or is he more in the slot? How do you think they'll deploy Forbes this year?
He played both in college. I'll say that. I think that it would be smart to start him in the slot, because that is one way, he can read those simpler routes on the quick slants. He can click and close really quickly. He can blow up screens, even though he's small. He had a very impressive pick 6 on a screenplay that he just read from before the ball was snapped. It was beautiful this last season, but I think he's going to start off in the slot. Hopefully he can gain a bit of mass and play on the outside starting year 2. I initially thought he was playing at 180, and that was concerning to me. And he's at 166. I think I don't care if you drafted him 16 overall. That's concerning you at least a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I think the NFL's gonna juice him up a bit. Not actually.
Not that juice.
That juice. Get some meat on his bones. Give him some peanut butter sandwiches and see what he can do.
Yep.
Now,
absolutely.
Before getting into our last part, the potential breakouts, I can't forget about special teams, because we got Tressway, best punter in the league, maybe fan favorite anyway. I think he's at least one of the best punters in the league. He's amazing, amazing person too. You see people wear their jerseys stamp, and he gets pictures with them and stuff. He's a great guy, on top of a great player. Kicker, Joey Sly or Michael Badgley. Whoever wins, it doesn't really matter to me. They're fine. Sly looks like a running back, though. He's 5'11", 213. He's solid muscle. And then my favorite, PFF's second-rated special teams group last season, behind only Detroit, which surprised me a bit. So, these people don't seem to care about special teams. I'm one of those people. but NFL coaches always talk about it. So, better to have a good special teams than a bad one.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't there. Although I will be curious to see how the rule change, and so for folks that maybe missed it this offseason, the rule change is on kickoffs. Anytime that the ball is fair caught behind the 25, then the ball is automatically placed at the 25.
Yeah,
and
right.
that is a big change because there are teams, the Chiefs being one of them, that would purposely kick just a little bit short of the end zone. So that way, the other team couldn't kneel it and would have to bring it out. And they might bring a high kick or something in there to make them at least return it. And basically that is entirely eliminated now. So anytime you kick it beyond the 25, if the receiving team fair catches it, they get it to 25. So I know that the league is doing this as I think an effort to try to cut down on they have statistics that are tracking collisions and concussions. And I think this is an effort to, what they would say, make the game safer. But I pretty much heard universal hate of it from the coaches. I mean, every coach that talked about it said basically like that it almost ruins the entire play. Like, why have the play at all, right? We might as well just have the offense come out at the 25 and have them start there. So we'll see how many times teams actually decide to not fair catch it and bring it out, and how teams kind of adjust to this rule change. But I'm not a fan of it. I agree with you, Cam. Special teams is a part of the game. It always has been. And it's an opportunity for great teams to get an edge on other teams that are not coached up as well or not prepared. And it also, special teams is a huge area where guys that aren't quite good enough to break into the starting rotation on offense or defense, that's where they make the team. That's where they make their living, right? They make their living on special teams. So if you're eliminating, a very important part of the game, then I mean, that's really a lot of guys that's going to make it that much harder for some of the guys further on the roster to ever get an opportunity to make plays if they just go out there and stand and then come back. So I don't like it. I think most people probably hate it, but the league is what it is.
Yeah, special teams has already changed so much. I mean, you go back, you watch Devin Hester and Josh Cribbs just 10 to 15 years ago, and those were some of the best plays in all of football.
Dante Hall, baby, the human joystick.
Yes. Yeah. So, all right. Well, now that we're done with the most important part of football, the special teams, let's get into a couple potential breakouts. Alex, did you have anyone here, or should I take it away?
Nope. I have the last thing I have, and we'll talk about last, is a matchup I look forward to the most. But yeah, no, take us away with the breakouts.
All right. So I put down 3. They're 2 guys I actually think can have real breakout seasons. The first, I said we talk about him later. Tight end Cole Turner. He was a 5th round rookie last season. Didn't get a ton of play time. And he is a bit undersized for an inline tight end. He's 6'6". That's not undersized, but he's 240. So he's slim for his height. And he's currently listed 3rd on the depth chart. But here's why I think he can break out. So he is a very good receiver, and he's a decent run blocker. He lined up in the slot a lot in college, and he thrived in contested catch situations. He had 17 contested catches in 2021, his last year in college, with a 58.6 contested catch win rate. He's quick. He can run seam routes. We can actually have kind of that vertical threat from the slot or from inline if he branches out that way, and we choose to, which is something that we haven't really had much lately. And on top of that, Logan Thomas is fragile. It's hard to put it any other way. He's always injured. And John Bates, second on the depth chart, he's a blocker. And as I said earlier, there's a very low EPA when throwing the ball to John Bates. It's way down there. So keep him blocking. If Logan Thomas goes down, I think Cole Turner could end up seeing quite a few targets. He played well in this preseason game. The first one, he had a 80.9 PFF grade, so he looked good. I think he can really start showing up as a receiving threat, because right now Logan Thomas is that dump off guy underneath, and he doesn't really make things happen. And we need playmakers to help our sophomore quarterback out. And the other guy I wanted to talk about is free safety Derek Forrest. Now, all Washington fans love this guy. He's not an under the radar guy whatsoever in Washington, D.C., but he might be to some other people. Now, he is super fun to watch. He's a little small, not too small, but he's a little small to play in the box anyway at 5'11", 200 pounds, but he delivers big hits. All right. He was 4 of the team's 9 interceptions last year.
Wow.
And as I said, he hit ETN week 1 last year. Oof, just go watch it if you want a big hit. It was beautiful.
I'm always a fan of a big hit.
Oh, yeah.
Let him play.
Literally every single week last year, he lined up in the box, he lined up in the slot, and he lined up as free safety. Every single year had snaps in all 3 spots.
Versatile.
Yeah, very versatile. He had a missed tackle rate of 7%, which is excellent for a defensive back. League average is roughly about 10.8% for defensive backs. It's even higher than 7% for all positions around the defense as well. So Derek Forrest really stepping into a full season with the starting role at free safety, showing what he can do, his versatility, his ability to make plays, right? We drafted Forbes because we need interceptions. Well, Derek Forrest can make things happen as well. We need turnovers and look to him to actually step up, be that late round draft pick who can become another stud, just like his buddy Cam Curl. So those are the 2 guys I have as real potential breakouts. And I listed the 3rd guy here. Because I want it to happen. I want Dyami Brown reunited with Sam Howell. They're the North Carolina buddies. He's clear to have a breakout year. He's clearly the 4th wide receiver on the depth chart, which is good, right? It's not lower than 4th, but with this trio in front of him, but he's a downfield threat. He can, I believe he had 5 receptions last season for 2 touchdowns. So they aired out to him, and maybe some of that synergy with his old quarterback can come back this year. So I'm looking to him to at least have a couple exciting plays throughout the year.
Nice. Yeah, great takes on there, those, Cam.
All right, man. Give me your matchup you're excited for.
Okay. Looking at the schedule, and I think I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier when we were talking about their offense in general, but I have week 4 going to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. Now, this is not a primetime game, which that kind of surprised me because I do think the Eagles are obviously going to be, probably in a lot of primetime games. And I didn't look and see what their primetime games are, but it's a 1:00 game, week 4. The reason I picked this is because, like I mentioned, I think in the first, 5-6 games, by the time we get to week 7 or something, I think we're going to have a pretty good feel for how good or not good this team is. And I think that's going to be a huge challenge. I mean, how going into that game against the defending NFC champions, who obviously have an excellent defense and are not going to, it's going to be a dogfight. And, I'm excited to watch that game. I'm excited to see how Howell performs in a hostile environment against a division rival. That'll be a big game. I think if somehow, if the offense can move the ball against the Eagles and they have a great game, I would say that would be even if they lose the game, that would be a huge boost, I think, for just their confidence and that level going into the rest of the season. If they get curb stomped, it's going to be tough. It'll be tough to bounce back from that, being a division game and how much that weighs. So I will be watching closely week 4, Commanders going to Philadelphia. What about you, Cam?
Oh, we're going to get slaughtered, man. That's going to be a rough week. I did not choose that week for mine. I have 2 matches that I'm looking forward to. Pretty easy for me to decide as well, because the first is week 1, not just because it's, week 1 and we want football to come back, but because the Cardinals are not projected to win any game this year, according to the sports books. It's really funny. People are making a big deal out of it. I think that's always the case for the last place team, because why would they be projected to win? But they are not projected to win any game, and they are pretty objectively not a strong roster. And it's going to set baseline expectations, right? Mm-hmm. Because if we struggle against the Cardinals, no one's going to have confidence. Mm-hmm. I mean, if if the Commanders lose, that's pretty much a death sentence for the season. I think if Sam Howell can go out there and get some confidence against a poor team, then that could really help him throughout the season. So that's week 1, and then week 2.
By the
we play
way,
the
isn't that Colt McCoy? Isn't Colt McCoy? Am I wrong on that? Who's the backup in Arizona? That's
Yep.
because I know that is Colt McCoy, right?
Yep,
Okay, so friendly face. I'm sure he'll want to come back and beat his old squad. But man, just on a side gig, Cam, if we ever had another opportunity to do different jobs, then we should be backup NFL quarterbacks because. Guys like Chase Daniel, I mean, Colt McCoy, they maybe play 10 games their whole season, their whole career, if that, I guess Colt McCoy's played a few more than that, but a lot of these backup quarterbacks, man, making what, 10 to 15 million a year, basically not playing. That'd be a good job.
Oh, it's the best job. Yeah. Yeah. You can just give some locker room speeches and cash your checks.
That's it.
So, so that's week 1, and then there's the Broncos. I have no real expectations against them, but weeks 3 and 4 are the Bills and Eagles, and after what I project to be more one-sided games because of those teams' ridiculous pass rush against our lesser offensive line, we play the Bears, and that coincidentally is in prime time. And I think if we can come back and against the Bears in prime time and start the season 3-2, then I think that sets us up pretty well for the season. Cardinals are certainly beatable. Broncos are certainly beatable.
Yep.
And then Bills, Eagles, Bears. So, our schedule after that, then just the next 2 games are the Falcons and the Giants. They're not world beaters by any means. Yep. So those games are very much toss-ups right now. I'd imagine those other teams are slightly favored at this moment. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing Sam Howell against Justin Fields in prime time. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, and if the Commanders can come out of that at 5-2, or even 4-3, I mean that's going to have it'll be buzzing in Washington. They'll be saying Super Bowl. At least some people will.
Yeah, and it's all because of Josh Harris.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. Any closing thoughts before I wrap this up?
Nope. Just, excited to see the season. Really, really fun to go do these deep dives with you. And just as a shout out to everybody, we are also going to be bringing fans on. So Cam and I obviously covered this one. We're going to our next show is going to be a Chiefs deep dive. So we'll probably use the same format. We'll kind of use the same structure, go through that with just the 2 of us. And then after that, we are looking to do some other deep dives and bring fans on. So if you want to come rep your team, and talk about some of these things and, tell Cam and I that we're right or tell us that we're horribly wrong, we welcome that. So just, hit us up in the DMs or whatever you want to do. Get a hold of us through our YouTube page, or of course, reaching out to us. Let us know you want to come on the show, and we will find a way to make that happen. But yeah, other than that, take us home, Cam.
Yeah, reach out, drop a comment. We can set up a time to talk to you if that's something that interests you guys. So thank you for listening to our 3rd ever episode of the F6 podcast. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and smash that subscribe button. It really does help us out. And as Alex said, we're going over the Chiefs this weekend, either this weekend or early next week. Yep. So you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And again, thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day, guys. Peace.